Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I have a fun video for everyone. As you can see, I have a single image render of geometric shapes. But the interesting thing is that the three layers that I have here is each one represents a different render pass. So today we're going to talk a little bit about render passes and how to set them up in Maya, and also a little bit about how to start your lighting process. So how to illuminate things so they look presentable, you don't have a blown up light, and with good practices as that. And remember, if you like what you see, don't forget to like and subscribe. And without further ado, let's get into it. So I'm here in Maya. So I have my three geometric basic shapes. I have my, so the key thing first is we need a plane. It could be a simple plane, doesn't have to be anything in particular, anything special. The key thing is has to be there because we want the shadows to go somewhere, okay? So it has to be right there, so we should be good to go. And we have our three main objects, A, B, and C, okay? For this process, we're gonna be using Arnold renderer. So always go to your render settings. Make sure we are in Arnold rendering right now. And right now, that's all we need for now. So first things first, let's start lighting up our scene. Right now, I'm going to keep it a low height and a low definition so we can do this process as quick as we can. Because rendering, it can be a slow process, but it would be a fun process to be. So for example, if I hit lights here, everything will be black because there's no lights. But in reality, what we're going to be using is this guy right here, which is the render view. And as you can see here, if I hit, I'm going to make sure we are in our camera. If I hit beauty, I'm going to hit play right now, and nothing, it's just there. If I click this to the, so there's nothing there because there's no lights. If I activate the alpha, we can see the objects are there, but that's about it. So let me stop this because this is going to be a great tool. So the main lights that work, the best lights personally that work with Arnold. So you're going to go to Arnold, lights, area light. So this area light number one, I'm going to do area light underscore, I'm going to call it key light. So this would be our main light. So this would be the light that would be casting our shadows. So if we move it, where do I want it? The area light, what is nice about it, this is the direction. This little line tells you there's direction where the light is coming from. And the easiest way to set up a light, if you have it selected, you're going to go panel, look through selected. So that way, when it looks like you're moving a camera, but you're actually setting up your light. Let's go something like that. So we want the key light to be around there. And also, once we're done, we're going to go back to perspective. Something important about an area light in Arnold render is that the size does matter. So for example, now, you're going to have these two windows. You have the render view and render the current frame. We're going to be working with the render view. This is very important. Why? Two things. One, if you see, it tells you what you want to do. You can select which camera you're going to be rendering off. But the best guy is this guy, the hit play button. So what it does like an interactive render. So as the moment you edit something in your scene, it will immediately recalculate it so you can see. So right now, we don't see nothing, and that's okay. I'm gonna make our light slightly bigger. And you see, it starts recalculating. But still we don't see nothing. And that's okay right now. That's a good enough size. So I'm going to hit Control A to open the attribute editor from our light. And part of the reason we see nothing is because of these guys right here. Our intensity is at 1, but our exposure is at 0. So if you ever know anything about cameras, every old cameras like Kodak film, everything was done by exposure level. So we're going to start. Small numbers. So we're going to go with 1. See, we're starting to see things here. Let's go with 2. So see things better. Let's go with 4. There we go, so much better. Let's go with 5. It's getting there. And let's go with 6. We're getting a nice thing going on. If you see right here, we're gonna go with 7. 6.5. But right now, if we look at it, we have the standard material. So how do we know that we are actually rendering correctly? Because the standard material for, actually more than rendering correctly, lighting correctly, the standard material for Maya, the AI surface, this guy right here, the standard surface, it's very dull. It has very matte gray color, has some roughness, but it has no transmission, no weight. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna select everything right now in our scene, all the meshes. I'm gonna go right click, assign new material, new material. So now that we're here, I'm gonna go to Arnold shader. I'm gonna select AI standard surface right there. And now this guy, I'm gonna call it shader is HDR underscore light. So this guy is gonna be, we're gonna use it for lighting our scene. So it looks much better color. So we know the weight on the color, we want 1. We want no metalness, no diffuse roughness because we want. The color, we want something almost, you can go something tiny, slightly gray, but not much. Specular, we want that. However, let's reduce the roughness because we want something pure. And everything else, we can leave it as is. And now let's look at things. I'm gonna hit play now. And you see how the lights start jumping better. We might see some reflections, things. So now it starts to look more like a real material. But because we have no color or close to a neutral gray, we can see how we're lighting better. So we can see the shadows, how we're happening, things like that. So far so good. So at this point, I might be, you know what? I want my light to be slightly higher or something. So we can go once again, select our light panel, look through selected. Let's move it slightly this way because we want to give more emphasis to the gear and there we go. Slightly back. We don't want it that close. Perfect. So now things are going better. We have a much better light, everything. Let's select our objects. And what I'm gonna do, just hit 3 for smooth so we can have a better look. So we have some shadows, some reflections, some contact shadows, but we have a pitch black back there. And let's be honest, if you're thinking of doing something like a render of your object, and unless you're doing something in a horror movie, it's not quite there yet. So, quick thing we're gonna also check. We're gonna leave those right now. We're not gonna touch this. We're just gonna make sure, because this is our key light, it's gonna have the cast shadows on. We're gonna leave that one there. So now let's create another one. Arnold lights, area light. Let's make it slightly bigger so we know where it is. You see it's pointing right there. So panel, look through selected, and let's bring it to this side. There we go. And you're gonna see, well, doesn't look like much. Perspective. Well, why does it look like much even though we have it here? Same reason. Its exposure is at 0, so it's creating no light. So before we do anything, we're gonna turn off this guy, because these guys are gonna be our fill light. So air shape underscore fill _01. So we're gonna start adding some light. And a nice rule of thumb that a lot of photographers will tell you, or lighting experts will say, that your fill lights should never be the same or greater than your key light. So we should never be at 6.5 or higher. So let's start with, let's go halfway, 3. That's nice. Let's push it back a little bit. Let's go a little bit more. Let's go 4. There we go. But let's rotate it a little bit because we want it to fill, but not to overpower. And let's make it bigger. There we go. Just giving more light. There we go. Let's move it slightly back. Still giving more light. We have more light here. Our interesting object is there. There we go. You know, perfect. We have the light, and then we don't want any shadows from it or cast shadows. So far so good there. So now let's create. Now we have this side very pitch dark. So let's duplicate this guy. Control D. Let's rotate it. Yeah. Panel, look through selected. Let's move it this way. How that looks. Panel, perspective, perspective. Should we move it slightly back? Closer. Too close. Let's push it back a little bit. So we want lights. There we go. So it's giving us some light here, some light there. And some people will say, well, there you go. You have your 3-point lights. There's, after working in the studio, there's two things. One thing that I learned. There is real life settings, and then there is cinematic settings. So that doesn't mean that, yes, 3-point lighting means just 3 lights. Absolutely. But in 3D, you want things to look good. So sometimes you gotta bend some of those settings. So let's zero it out, everything here. Let's rotate it this way. And let's bring it down. So we don't have a pitch black over there. So we have almost like a rim light. There we go. Let's rim light, maybe let's try 5. And this light, let's try 5.5. There we go. And now, so we're getting much interesting light, shadows, everything going on. And now we have that set up. Let's play a little bit with this, guys. So we can play with the roundness of our lights and shadows, the soft edge. Let's increase, we can reduce the spread, so we can have more unique touches. We can increase the sample to 2, and this will be the quality. And last but not least, if you want to increase the quality of your shadows from 512, 1024. so you have higher quality. Don't forget, if the higher resolution, the longer it's going to take your render. So I'm going to bring it down to 512 just for this exercise. But there we go. We have shadows, we have lighting, we have interesting lighting here and there. So we should be good to start. So I'm happy with the setup right now. So I'm going to hit. So at this point, you should be like, okay, I'm good to go. But let's texture it. So what I'm going to do is, let's create some textures. Right now I'm going to use just generic textures. So I'm going to go assign new material. It's going to color, we're going to go to standard surface. This one we're going to call it shader cube. Good practice, name everything. And for the sake of this assignment, for this exercise, I'm going to use just presets for speed. So that one I'm going to do the jade. Okay, there we go. For the gear, assign new material, shader, standard surface. This one, let's go with copper. So, no, gold. Do I want gold? No, let's go with copper. So it looks. So there we go. We have some metallic. You see reflection. So it's interesting for this exercise. And then this guy, assign. Let's go new material, shader, standard AI standard surface, presets. Let's go with car paint. So then we have colors bouncing all around. And for last but not least, our ground plane. In this case, assign new material, shader, and a standard surface. Let's go with a plastic. Ooh, too much. Let's go with something lighter, different color. There we go. So at this point, the lighting part, we're happy. We are all set, we're good. In this sense, I'm only working with a single frame. Always remember to adjust your textures based on how much you want to render, if you're going to stylize, things like that. But at this point, see if it's a single frame, 17 seconds, that's a lot. But sometimes you need it, depends on the project. So right now, I'm going to hit pause. So I'm going to stop it right there. And this is where the basic lighting part stops. So I'm going to concentrate now on the rendering process inside Maya, specifically Maya. So now, when you have your model and you're happy with it, as any modeler or compositor, you have to render it. And it does not make sense to have one file for your beauty render, one file for your occlusion, one file for your shadow pass, and then one file for your wireframe render. Everything can be done inside of Maya with Arnold render in one file. So what I'm going to do at this point, I'm going to save as. I'm going to call it, I'm calling it light video, so I'm going to call it light video 02. So I'm going to do a couple things first. So I'm going to make sure my three main pieces are in regular version, in low poly version. So I'm going to select them and I'm going to duplicate them. And this one, each one of them, I'm going to change its name to _HP. So mgear _HP. So HP means for high poly. So Control V and Control V. Okay, now the high poly ones, I'm going to select all three of them, and I'm going to go into the modeling, mesh, I'm going to hit smooth. So I'm going to keep them the smooth version of them already, and then I'm going to have the low poly version of them for the wireframe render. So now that we have this, let's start. So we're going to do right here with the render setup. So when you open it like here, like this, you just have your scene with a little eye and the little film gate or the film clacker to set up the time. So that way is to see is like, this is the master layer, this is what I'm going to render. So I always unclick that, and right now it doesn't let you unclick this. So let's create a new render layer. And this one we're going to call beauty or underscore color. Either or works. So we have this layer, but it's empty. We have nothing in it. How do we put things inside of it? Very simple. We're going to right click and we're going to create collection. So this collection, here we add things. So if we're going to do the beauty, what do we need? We need the high poly objects. We need our ground plane. We need our render camera, of course, and our lights. So once you have those selected, middle mouse button, click and drag there. So now fun thing, if I select this, go here, look, because we are in this layer right now, we can see just those objects. So for example, right now, if I activate the render view, if I hit play, let's wait a second, we see exactly the same thing we've been working on. Hooray! I'm going to hit stop. I don't want it to take the entire time. So the beauty, the color is done. Hooray! Now let's do a new layer. This layer we're going to call shadow, which are our shadows. Once again, we need to create a collection. A shadow, what do we need? Well, we need our high quality objects or high poly objects, our ground plane, because that's where we're going to cast the shadows, our camera, and what does create the shadows? Our lights. So we need our lights. One more time, we're going to middle mouse button, click and drag. And I'm going to select the eye right here. But so far, what's the difference here? I haven't done anything different. This is where it comes the fun part. I'm going to right click here. And I'm going to create shader override. So that means is anything inside this collection is going to get an override. And which shader we're going to override? We're going to go right here. We're going to go Arnold, shader, and we're going to select shadow matte. So if you see, things change a little bit in here. So let's have fun. So now if I open the render view, hit play, you see, like, what? I don't see anything. It's full black. Well, no, let's activate the alpha. Voila! There's our shadows. How awesome is that? So we have our shadows there. So we can control the shadows, the intensity we want, and things like that. So we're going to hit stop. So there we have our beauty, our shadow. And then I want to see something very fun. This is our camera. If I hide the eye right here, you see how things change? That's the beauty of the power of the render layers. So let's create one more. And this one, we're going to call it OCC which is ambient occlusion. Ambient occlusion is better known for a lot of people as the contact shadows, the little dark spaces or at the corner between two walls, that little shadow that's happening, that's your occlusion. So, once again, right click, create collection. Now, what do we need on this one? The great thing about ambient occlusion, well, we're gonna still need our ground, our camera, our high poly models, but we don't need our lights. So we're gonna middle mouse, drag to there. So now we're going to right click, once again, create a shader override. And the shader we're gonna select this time around is AI Ambient Occlusion. So if we select this one, let's do a quick test again. Let's hit play. And there we go, our ambient occlusion. You can go in and adjust the settings for the occlusion, but right now for this test, I like the way it is. It's not too much, it's just quite right. It's not too extensive. So it looks perfectly fine. So I'm gonna stop. So we're good. And now, so we have the key main ones for our render. And if this was a turntable or a 360, you do want to show your wireframe to show how polished your topology, everything's going on. So let's create one more render layer. We're going to call it wireframe. In this case, the wireframe, we don't right click, create collection. Here, we do not need our lights. So we need our camera. We need now that low poly version of our objects, but we don't need the ground plane. So we're simple like that. I'm going to right click, create shader override, Arnold shader, AI wireframe. As you can see, even though the lights show there, because we have the collection, doesn't matter. And then if we go to the AI wireframe, quick thing, we're gonna make sure we're polygons, a white, black. Let's check with that width. Let's do a quick test render. And there we go. Let's do the line width, let's make it 1.3. Easier to see. Yeah, let's go 1.5. There we go. The nice thing, it has an alpha channel, so everything we need. I'm gonna hit stop. So at this point, we have our four render layers: our beauty, our shadows, our occlusion, and our wireframe. So let's save. I'm gonna hit just file save. So how do I tell Maya to render all of them in one go? So let's just say you need some render time, some nap time. So let's go to our render settings right here. A couple things we have to do. First things, we're gonna tell Maya how to save the file. So in the file name prefix, please don't start typing manually whatever you want. Maya is smarter than that. So you can right click, we're gonna call it our scene. This is why it's so important to name everything. Then inside our scene folder in the images that we set project, let's create another folder and we're gonna call it camera. So we know it's from our render camera. Then we're gonna create inside there another folder that's called render layer, and then one more render layer. So what we're telling it is inside it's going to create a folder, which is inside the images folder. It's going to create a folder called light video 02, Inside that folder is going to create a C render camera, and then inside each one is depending on the render layer. It's going to select the render layer. Next thing we're going to do, we're going to select the render camera. And if you're rendering image sequence, you're going to select, for example, name.number.extension. And then you select your files. But right now, because we're doing just a single frame for the sake of this exercise, of course, you're going to go full HD. And at this point, if you want to go higher resolution, you can go. But we're almost set. You can see we have the render layers here. So let's open our render layers one more time. And you're going to see these guys right here, the film. So if you see what it says is mark it as renderable for batch render. So the scene one, I'm going to turn it off. I'm going to make sure beauty or color, shadow, occlusion, and wireframe are activated. Now that I have that, we're almost there. I'm going to hit render, the rendering tab. We're going to go render, render sequence, option box. So once again, we're going to tell it that we're rendered from C-render, but here's the key thing that we have to activate. All render enabled layers. We're going to activate that one. So we make sure everything that we have set up so far is good. So what I'm going to do right here, so I'm inside the folder I have set up. So let's start. So I'm going to hit render sequence and close. So you get that open. Well, we have that. So it created that file. So right now it's rendering beauty. As it's render beauty, you can see all nice and pretty. It's going there. And it's rendering. Perfect. So finish beauty. Now it's rendering something else. Occlusion, wireframe, and shadow. And it should be almost here. It's done. Render sequence, rendering completed. So now, if I go to the folders, I'm going to hit live video _02. We have the camera folder. And then we have our 4 folders. Beauty color, which is an EXR that we saved. And occlusion, shadow, and wireframe. All of those are EXR. So we should be good. So now let's go to Photoshop. I already have that open file, but now what I can do is, let me go to beauty. I'm just going to click and drag. Open EXR, you just, the alpha channel, you wanted to do it as transparency always. So I'm going to hit OK. So there we go, beauty color. You see, we can see the reflection a little bit, we can see the shadow, but it doesn't look as pretty. So now, let's bring in the occlusion. As transparency, okay. Wait a moment, it's all white. Well, occlusions, we always have to switch the blending mode to multiply. So now you can see how we have that occlusion going on and multiply. Now, let's bring in our shadows. Transparency. There we go, our shadows, nice and pretty. The shadows, what you can always do, switch it to darken. And what is really great about doing this process, which might seem longer at the setup and then the render time, but now you have the power and the ability to control. So for example, if you want your shadows to be not as dark, you can lighten them. You can lighten a little bit. You want your occlusion not as heavy, you can reduce the opacity. So you can play with those. So you can bring in your work to a higher level. And then, if you want to show the quality of your work, of your modeling work, there you go. Your wireframe, which you can animate transparency coming and going. Okay. And with that, that is the end of this video. So this is a great way to start lighting in an easier way or a more object-oriented way. There's also, by rendering in the render passes, it will give you much more control on your final product, which all the studios in film or animation do. They don't just do a final render right from the get-go. They actually do a beauty pass, shadows, occlusions, but they even have reflections. They have the light passes, so they can control the lights in a different ways. So they do many more render passes. But to get you started, just to get those three going on, it's a great point. And the wireframe is an extra bonus because as a modeler or as a prospective 3D artist, you always want to show your work. And this is it for me. I hope you liked the video. If you do, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you have any more questions or would like to see something else, please feel free to leave a comment down below. And see you guys on the next time. Have a good one.